Hey there guys, we all like to make fun things for our birds to play with. So in today's video, I am going to show you how you can build an orb for your parrot. This is a fun hanging play structure that your bird can play on. And the materials that you can make this out of can be easily found at most big box hardware stores. So if this is something you want to try to build, you want to make sure to stick around because that's going to be coming up right after this. Hey there guys, this is Jack over at Hybrid Bird, where I am tirelessly working to find new ways to make the keeping of exotic animals and pets more exciting, more affordable, and ultimately more enjoyable. And in today's video, I wanted to show you guys how I could build an orb. Now this is a great hanging structure. You can usually find these at most bird marts. But the problem is with quarantine and everything else that has been going on, a lot of people haven't really have access to things like these because shipping is going to be ridiculous on an item like this just because it's not very heavy, but it ends up being very large. So I wanted to show you guys how you could build this for just about any type of parrot. And I love to hear from you guys. So go ahead, leave me a comment down in the comment section down below. Let me know what type of parrot you guys have, because that definitely helps me know what sorts of videos to put together, what type of toys you guys want to see made, how big, how durable you need those items to be. Now, the good news is a structure like this is really easy to build. It's actually fairly inexpensive to build as well once you have all of the materials that you need. But if you're building things for your parrots, if you're building stands, if you're building play gyms, this is going to use a lot of the same parts, a lot of the same techniques. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump in how we're going to put this together. Now, putting this together is going to be very straightforward. The parts that you need are pretty easily obtainable too. Now, the bulk of this project is going to be made using PVC electrical conduit. You are going to need 12 pieces that are cut to the same length. Now, there are going to be a couple of different types of electrical conduit available at your hardware store. So you want to make sure that you are getting PVC non-metallic electrical conduit. Other options that are available are not going to be things that are safe for your bird to get. So make sure that you are getting something that will actually make this project useful. So the 1/2-inch PVC conduit that I'm using right now is going to be a great option for most birds. And again, you're going to need 12 pieces of that, all cut to the same length. Now for this, I am using 16-inch pieces of electrical conduit. To get that, you want to make sure that you have a measuring utensil and a marking utensil. Here, I'm just using a tape measure and a Sharpie. You'll notice that I am using a sewing measuring tape. This conduit is typically kept coiled in a pretty tight roll. That makes it harder to use something like your typical construction tape measure. So using a sewing tape measure, which is a lot more flexible, is going to be in your best interest. It makes it a lot easier to measure and get your cuts. Now, of course, if you wanted to change this up a little bit, you could make this bigger, you could make this smaller. The important part is that all of your parts stay the same length. So if you wanted to go down to 12 inches, all 12 of your pieces would just have to be cut at 12 inches. If you don't want to measure it, if you just want to eyeball it, what you're going to want to do is cut the first piece that you have at the length that you want it and use it as a template to measure and cut all of your other pieces. Knowing the exact length of your pieces isn't as important as them all being the exact same length. If you want to go that route, I'm just going to caution you guys, make sure that you are using one piece as a template and the other pieces are just being cut from that one template. If you use your first piece to cut your second piece to cut your third piece, so on and so forth, by the time you get to the end, I can almost guarantee that your pieces are going to be wildly different lengths. Now, in order to cut this, the good news is this cuts really easily using our ratcheting PVC cutters. I've shown you guys numerous tutorials on how to utilize these on PVC pipe. It is going to cut through this conduit just as easily. So they're definitely a great tool, something you should have in your Parrot toy making arsenal. Now, since we are using 1/2-inch PVC conduit, we are also going to need some corresponding fittings. We are going to need 6 PVC cross fittings. You want to make sure that these are all the same size as your conduit. So if you're using 1/2-inch conduit like I am here, you want 1/2-inch cross fittings. You also want to make sure that these are all slip fittings. That means on the inside of the fittings, it's going to be smooth. There's no threading, nothing that you're going to be screwing together. Now, to have the opportunity to hang this up, we are going to need to put an eye bolt in so that it can hang. So you're going to need a stainless steel eye bolt. You are going to need a stainless steel nylon threaded locking nut that corresponds to that eye bolt. Now we are going to go ahead, we are going to drill into one of our fittings, and that is where we're going to put that eye bolt so that this can hang up. Of course, you don't have to use just one eye bolt. You could put multiple eye bolts. You could put an eye bolt in every single fitting. That would give you the opportunity to hang other toys off of it. Maybe you want to hang toys off the side, the bottom, or on the inside. That'll give you the option to do that. But you are going to need at least one eye bolt and one locking nut in order to have the ability to hang this up. Now you're going to want to make sure that you have a drill and a corresponding drill bit in order to drill that hole into that cross fitting. Now, you don't need to know the exact size of your drill bit. There's not a particular size you need to use. You just need to make sure that it is a larger drill bit than the shaft of your eye bolt, but smaller than the locking nut and the eye of your eye bolt. That way you can easily thread this through, but it's not going to fall apart on you. You're also going to need a pair of needle nose pliers. We're going to be using those to secure the eye bolt on the inside of the cross fitting. And a wrench or anything else is going to be pretty difficult to use in that tight space. So I definitely recommend using the needle nose pliers. And the final product we are going to need is we are going to be using some clear PVC cement. This is going to hold quite a bit of weight. And unlike some of the other products that we have put together, this is not going to be pushing all of that weight down. When I've showed you guys how to build other structures, the weight of the bird is actually pushing that more together. But an orb is typically a place where a bird is flapping, moving around quite a bit. So you want to make sure that it has a good amount of support and strength. Now, adding an eye bolt to a PVC fitting is one of the most useful techniques in your Parrot toy building arsenal. I'm going to drill halfway through this cross, and I want to make sure that I use the drill bit in reverse to help clean away as much of that plastic as possible. I'm going to use my finger to wipe away any small bits of plastic that your bird could potentially ingest. Now, once that is cleaned up, I am going to use my needle nose pliers to hold the locking nut in place. I'm going to hold that inside the cross fitting. That way the bird will never have access to it. And I am going to screw the eye bolt into place into that cross fitting. I'll tell you guys right now, getting those first couple of turns on that eye bolt is going to be the hardest thing to do. And it is made a little bit harder if you are attempting to record it. But once you get it started, it is pretty easy. If it gets a little tight for you, what you can do is take a screwdriver, put that through the eye bolt, and just use the leverage of that to turn to get it as tight as you want it to be. But it is pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and now you have a great way to hang up this toy. Now when I want to put this orb together, it's pretty straightforward. I am going to want something to protect my table. I'm also going to want coffee because coffee makes the world better. Now, I am going to be using that PVC cement, and I'm going to use that inside of the fittings. I'm only going to apply it to the inside of the fittings. I am not going to apply it to the outside of the conduit, which is what you would typically do. You would typically apply cement to both the inside of the fitting and the outside of the conduit. Now the problem with that for birds, if I apply cement to the inside of the fitting and then push the conduit into that fitting, it'll push any excess glue into the fitting as well. But if I have cement on the outside of the pipe and I push that into the fitting, the sides of the fitting are then going to push that excess cement out. That's going to create a bead of cement that my bird could potentially pick at or ingest, and I want to avoid that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is build a circle. This is going to take 4 of your PVC cross fittings and 4 of your pieces of conduit. Now, make sure that you are securing them as you go. And you want to make sure that you get each and every one of the fittings turned so they are pretty much have openings up and down. That is going to make this easiest for you guys. You also want to make sure that you are trying to use as much of the natural curve of that conduit as possible. When you need a little bit more room, go ahead. I'm just using an old towel. Protect your table because you don't want to run the risk of that PVC cement getting onto your table, especially if you're building onto something like your dining room table, like I am right now, because if you get PVC cement on that table, you will get yelled at. And we want to try to avoid that. The entire purpose of this is to make something enjoyable. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to utilize the natural curve of that PVC conduit to try to get as close to the center as possible, and then I'm going to push it into position. Now the good news is if you've cut all of these pieces to the same size, as you get it together, it will start to pull itself into shape. Once you've got one side done, you can see I just took 4 pieces, secured those with a cross fitting on one side. We're going to do the same on the other side. Now we do still have that PVC fitting with our eye bolt attached to it reserved. We're going to do that part at the very end. Now the reason I like to do that at the end is that eye bolt sticks out even more than that cross fitting, so it would make it a little bit tricky. I don't want that scratching against my table. I don't want that offsetting this even more. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use that cross fitting with the eye bolt. I want to make sure the eye bolt goes up because this is what I'm going to use to hang it. Now, if you wanted to do any other cross fittings on the inside, you could have that eye bolt face in, you could have it face out. That is completely up to you. But for the base structure, you are going to need to make sure that your eye bolt faces out. Now, when you are done with that, you want to just go through, make sure that you are pushing it, every single joint. You want to make sure that it is nice and stable. When you're first done, it may be a little bit wonky, but if you cut everything appropriately, it will bounce into the appropriate size. Now, as you guys can see, that is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It comes together in just a few minutes once you have all of your parts and materials gathered. Now, there's a couple of things I did want to point out to you guys. Remember, since that PVC conduit is typically kept stored in a pretty tight coil, if you don't utilize the natural coil of the PVC, when you first build this, you may have a couple of places that are a little bit wonky. Maybe it leans slightly to the left. If the pieces were all cut to the same length and they're all secured into position, it will eventually correct itself as your bird moves and plays around on it. The other good thing is if one of your pieces was maybe, half an inch to an inch too long, it's going to be a little bit off there too. But as long as you get it well secured into all of those fittings, as long as it's secured everywhere, the good news is your bird probably won't tell anybody that you weren't the greatest builder. Another thing I like about this PVC conduit, because of the ridges in the PVC conduit, birds typically have a really easy time grabbing onto this. But if it is still a little slick, if it's not to your liking in terms of providing something safe and enjoyable for your bird, an easy modification that you can do pretty quickly is just wrap it in vet wrap. This is a great way to ensure that PVC perches, which can be a little more slick, are going to have good grip for your bird. It's also a good way to ensure that this is kept really clean, because if your bird gets this dirty, you cut it off and replace it. But it's really easy, really straightforward, and definitely something I encourage you guys to try to make. So I certainly hope that you guys enjoyed this video tutorial. If you enjoyed it, go ahead, give me a thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the Hybrid Bird channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of this fun content. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. I do need to say thank you to my Patreon patrons for helping to make these videos possible. You can find out more by visiting Hybrid Bird on Patreon or clicking the link in the description section down below if you would like more information. Thanks!